coffee. So I'm missing the speakers for this session, so...
I'm Lawrence Carter, so I'm not up first. I think I'm
Yes.
second. I'll just sit here, ready for you.
Okay, so I have one speaker, Natahlie, who is... Hi! You are? Yes.
She's coming. She's just a minute.
But if you can just come down, that would be... We should have 5 presentations. Hi.
I have the legal framework.
Oh yes, I heard about this one.
Yeah.
This is this one?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Hi. So, Natahlie, I know Natahlie. That's number 4. You are... Which one is that?
Mine, yeah, that's the problem. Mine, it's not here. But there was a mistake because they put the last year's presentation. Yes, in the program. I'm still waiting for this to be fixed. Yeah, this is last year's. Yes, it's like
Okay.
and I'm here. You see, second.
Okay, so you were in the wrong session.
Yes. So I've
So
been
what
told
is
that
what is your presentation today?
today is on sharing data for enabling. I blanked on the sharing data.
Do you have it
Yes, I did.
uploaded? Okay.
I sent it to Eric yesterday. Can I go last because you're still recording?
Okay, so you go last. You go just before Natahlie. That's number 4.
If they have my presentation, that's okay.
Yes. We have Carter. What is your first? And who is the person presenting blockchain? Ah, very good. You're the first on the list. Okay, so that's you first, you second. I'm missing the third one is patient-mediated approach to sourcing secondary use. Okay, then let's start with our first. Hello? No, I'm here. I'm I'm blind from the projectors. Can Eric? Can we have the first presentation?
We are waiting for internet this presentation. She's coming.
Ah, okay. Blockchain. That's yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Céline Gauthier-Maxence, and I am a postdoctoral researcher working on the SafePO project, which is about the use of health data in the AI and numeric era. So I'm working, this project is led by Milcent, which is here with me, who will be joining me in answering any question you may have. My goal today is twofold: to pinpoint exactly what we can realistically do with blockchain in healthcare without putting ourselves at risk, and to think these conclusions to the EHDS timetable and the security and compliance requirements at the heart of the EHDPC today. So the EHDPC brings together stakeholders in health data protection, cybersecurity, and responsible reuse. Blockchain technology addresses these issues. It promises traceability, auditability, and interoperability of access, but it also raises questions about the GDPR, individual rights, and network governance. With the EHDS, the EU is establishing an operational framework for primary access to patient records and secondary use of data. My guiding question is therefore how we can design EHDS and GDPR compatible blockchain solutions that are useful and sustainable. So I'm going to present you this blockchain development in four different times. First, technical reminders about blockchain and health care use cases, and then the European legal frameworks applicable to blockchain in healthcare, its opportunities and constraints, and of course, regulating the use of blockchain in healthcare. So first, a quick reminder about how blockchain works and its applications in healthcare. Let's take the example of Bitcoin to help those who are unfamiliar with the concept of blockchain understand it. If you send a certain number of Bitcoins from one address to another, a transaction is requested in the network. The Bitcoin validation process and the implementation of new blocks are carried out by miners, who are rewarded for their participation in securing the network with newly mined cryptocurrency units. The Bitcoin node network validates the transaction with cryptographic algorithm. This process is called mining. Once the transaction has been verified, it is combined with other transactions to form a new block of data within a specific frame. The new block containing your transaction is added to the blockchain. The transaction is then completed and the block is integrated into the Bitcoin blockchain. As you can see on this figure, a smart contract can be used. It is a program recorded on the blockchain that automatically executes actions when certain conditions are met. For example, access, validating access, recording consent, or revoking authorization. In healthcare, they can automate access, controls and workflows, enforce rules shared between multiple institutions without a single point of trust, ensure consistency and auditability. In healthcare, the chain is already used for proof of integrity, called hashing, consent and access logging between stakeholders, hospitals, laboratories, insurers, authorities, etc. Main cases include consent traceability, document timestamping and integrity, interinstitutional audit trails, etc. In healthcare, the distinction between public and private or permission blockchain is essential. Public networks, which are open to everyone, offer transparency but little control other nodes or data, which is incompatible with the GDPR. Conversely, private and governed blockchains make it possible to restrict access, identify participants, and ensure compliance. This is the model that prevails for medical uses. Here are a few examples that you can see the logos here. So you have MedRec, which is a prototype for managing access permissions to medical records through Ethereum blockchain. Patients control the distribution of their records with decentralized logging and permissions. You have Guatime KSI, which is in Estonia, which works to ensure the integrity and traceability of health records at the national level using cryptographic encores, integrated into Estonia's e-health infrastructure. MedLedger also is a permission network for product verification and anti-counterfeiting. And then Trial offers anchoring and tracking of electronic trial master files for auditability and inspection readiness. Pilots have been announced as well as SaaS integration. Now let's set the legal scene. Here are the key texts applicable in this area. First, the GDPR, of course, on health data provides the legal basis and lists the exceptions allowing the use of health data as sensitive data. It also reiterates individuals' rights regarding their health data, erasure, rectification, portability, etc. Next, the EHDS structures primary access to patient data and secondary use through access organizations. It imposes interoperability, security, and access procedures. On the security side, NICE 2 extends the obligations of essential important entities, while the Cyber Resilience Act imposes security by design requirements on digital products. Finally, the Data Act and DGA complete the picture on access, sharing, and governance of this data. All of this shapes how a blockchain solution should be designed and operated. Oh, I think it's blocked. In addition, recent guidelines from the European Data Protection Board clarify key points. Qualification of actors, who is the data controller, who is the data processor, and where are the nodes located. Minimization, avoid putting personal data on chain, prefer references and encryption. Quasi-systematic data protection impact assessment required by GDPR for all high-risk processing. And respect, of course, for individual rights, so consider logical erasure and rectification through governed off-chain mechanism. Let's take a closer look at the opportunities and constraints of blockchain in healthcare. On the opportunity side, we find the properties that motivated its adoption in several sectors: transparency of exchanges, reduced transaction times, cryptographic security, cost control, fraud automation, and above all, the irreversibility of entries, which builds trust in records and audits. But each of these strengths has a downside. Transparency, for example, immediately raises the issue of medical confidentiality and proportionality of access. And on a technical level, blockchain still faces structural challenges. Interoperability between heterogeneous networks and healthcare systems, scalability, storage, since full replications of blockchain's burdens infrastructure, and social trust, which depends on acceptance by professionals and patients. Let's focus on the legal aspects. One of the main points of tension between blockchain and personal data law lies in the very principle of immutability. By design, a blockchain prevents the modification or deletion of information that has already been recorded. This is precisely what makes it a trusted technical tool. The integrity of a record can be verified, actions can be traced, and it can be guaranteed that no falsification has taken place. But this same advantage becomes a legal weakness when it comes to personal data. The right to erasure, the right to rectification, and the right to restriction of processing assume that information can be modified or deleted at the request of the data subject. The issue is therefore not only technical, it is philosophical and legal. What does it mean to delete data in a register designed to remember everything? Several approaches to reconciliation are now recognized. First, the off-chain, on-chain approach. Personal or identifying data is never stored on the blockchain. Only a cryptographic fingerprint, a hash, is stored. If the source data is deleted from the external system, the fingerprint becomes unusable and is therefore logically deleted. Next, the logical erasure technique. A trace of the data's existence is retained, but the decryption keys are destroyed, making the content inaccessible. Finally, compensatory addition. Rather than altering a block, a new one is added that corrects or invalidates the old one, while retaining the traceability of the corrections. These solutions do not physically delete the data, but they do remove its legal effects. The data can no longer be consulted or used, and is therefore no longer processed within the meaning of the GDPR. So the challenge is not to pit blockchain against the GDPR, but to rethink the very notion of erasure in the era of distributed traceability. So let's move on to a concrete checklist concerning the regulation of blockchain use in healthcare. In the context of the GDPR and the future EHDS, compliance must be integrated from the outset. This is the principle of privacy by design, completed here by security by design. In practice, this means that the architecture must be designed to minimize exposed data and limit the trust required. Personal data remains off-chain, are stored in secure, audited environments, subject to access controls and controlled retention periods. The blockchain itself only stores cryptographic fingerprints or pseudonymous references that allow integrity and traceability to be verified without ever revealing the underlying information. From a security perspective, security by design requires robust key management, consensus mechanism adapted to the level of risk, clear governance of updates, and continuous traceability of access and events. This compliance design achieves three things: reduces the attack surface and therefore the likelihood of incidents, ensures proof of integrity without infringing on individual rights, and finally facilitates subsequent certification, whether under GDPR, NIS2, or the Cyber Resilience Act. Having seen the tensions between immutability and individual rights, the next question is, who is responsible? Because while blockchain makes traceability and transparency technically possible, it also blurs the lines of responsibility. In a traditional processing scenario, there is a clearly identified data controller. A hospital, a laboratory, a public authority, several actors are involved in the validation and dissemination of data. Who then is responsible for complying with the GDPR? The European Data Protection Board provides a pragmatic answer. In a permission network, participants must be defined their roles contractually, controllers, for example. This clarification must be included in consortium agreements that specify the purpose of the processing, the security measures, and the procedures for exercising individuals' rights. Smart contracts then play a key role in this governance, but beware, a smart contract is not a contract in the legal sense. It must be backed by legal agreements. It relies on oracles for real-world data. These validations are done off-chain and must be governed. Versioning, shutdown procedures, and audits must be provided to limit the risk associated with bugs. To conclude, 3 main messages. Blockchain is not a patient database. It is a record of evidence and access. It is already used specifically by startups, but also by some countries like Estonia with Guatemala I present you at the beginning. GDPR and EHD compliance is achievable if the architecture is off-chain by default with minimization and robust governance. And finally, the EHDPC today can accelerate the ecosystem by converging on common implementation, profiles, and contractual models. Thank you for your attention. We will be happy to answer all your questions. You can contact us at the following addresses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, when I was looking at that, I thought there are so many concepts, we could do a full day workshop only on this. Unfortunately, we have 5 presentations, so please keep your question for Céline for the lunch break.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I call now Lawrence.
Hi, Eric. Can I have the slides for my presentation, please? Coming up, should be coming up on screen in a second. I can see them down on this screen. Any way we can get them up here? Oh, wonderful. Right, hi, thank you very much for having me, everyone. My name is Lawrence Carter. I'm a DPO at the DPO Centre. So I'm an external DPO that represents organisations operating globally. Today I'm going to be talking to you about secondary uses of health data and comparing approaches in the EU and the UK, horizon scanning over the next 5 years. I should say what is on these slides is my opinion and not necessarily the opinion of the DPO Centre or their clients. What we're going to cover today, I want to talk to you about 4 different paradigms: systems, strategies, pseudonymisation, and laws, or the legal framework. And if we look at the EU and the UK, we can see that there's a lot of similarities. There's new systems coming into place, the EHDS, the HDRS. Both regions have launched life sciences strategies this year. We have different approaches to pseudonymisation to take into account, and laws coming into effect which will impact secondary use. Looking at the timeline for a second, even just the past 10 months, the EU has introduced changes to all 4 of these paradigms: the EHDS, formally adopted, the strategy announced in July, various legal changes, and of course the SRB case and the EDPP guidance. Strikingly though, the UK, if you look at the same timeline, has covered a lot of the same content in the same time frame. We've had the HDRS announced, we've had the UK life sciences strategies, changes to law, and ICO guidance on pseudonymisation. So a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences. The next few slides, I'm going to try and summarise very briefly what I think are the pros and cons of each of these approaches in the EU and the UK for organisations that are looking to do secondary use in those regions. Firstly, I haven't got time to talk about the EHDS in a huge amount of detail. I'm going to try and talk quite quickly, but I'll just talk through some benefits and challenges that I see. It looks like it's going to be considerably well funded, at least 14 billion euros, perhaps more at the member state level, bringing into this, and it's going to be promoting secondary research from the outset, which is really promising, having that sort of opt-out model. Those individual opt-out rights and transparency built in. We don't yet quite know how granular that's going to be, but it seems very encouraging that that's the approach. There are a few question marks in my head. So the EHDS regulation talks about pseudonymization and anonymization data differently, but as Christoph was saying in the talk earlier, under the SRB case, maybe there's not so much of a difference, so perhaps there's a little bit of a clarity gap there. The health data access bodies, what they're going to look like is yet to be determined, how many of them they're going to be and how harmonized they're going to be. Just the technical challenge of having interoperability of a single health record for primary or secondary use across all these member states, languages, time zones is going to be an immense headache for somebody, and I'm glad that's not me. And there will be some new compliance obligations, as Christoph was saying, for data holders as well to take into consideration. Let's compare that with what we know about the HDRS, the Health Data Research Service, announced by Sir Keir Starmer earlier this year. Again, it's going to have a very similar approach of promoting that secondary research by default. But there are perhaps more question marks in this regard. So what we know so far is that £600 million of funding has been announced, which, if you've worked in the UK NHS, knows that's not going to get you very far. That's how much the consultants will charge to tell you that it costs 10 years of time. So perhaps there's a funding gap there. The significant government and NHS reforms coming into effect over the next few years. So for those that aren't in the UK, the NHS England body is being abolished and consumed into the Department of Health and Social Care, which nobody's quite sure how that's going to look like. There are other possible changes coming down the line. The Data Use and Access Act talked about health information standards, which may or may not be coming online, which could have an impact on the HDRS. What we know so far is that the government would like to have some kind of version of the HDRS operational by the end of 2026, which is wildly optimistic, considering that the EHDS is looking at dates into 2031 to be operational. I think having anything ready in the next 12 months would be a miracle. There have been, I don't want to call them failures, but let's call them disappointments in the UK in terms of programmes encouraging secondary use, so care.data, DPR. I could go on, but I haven't got the time. Come talk to Barry if you've got more questions at lunch break. And there's perhaps a question about the scope, without getting into the geopolitics, whether this is going to apply to the whole of the UK, to England first. It's not quite clear at this point. Whether it's going to communicate with the EHDS, it would be lovely if it could. I think that's one to be determined by the politicians, and we shall have to wait and see as to whether or not that's going to come into effect. So the EU published a life sciences strategy in July. It's the, well, let's just call it the EU Life Science Strategy. It's a mouthful. Again, it looks like it's going to be very well funded. There's going to be some wonderful programs and initiatives as part of that coming online. There are some question marks outstanding, particularly in relation to harmonisation and whether it's harmonisation in name only. Christoph's presentation earlier was wonderful talking about that as well. Also, mentioned earlier today, the data union strategy we're all awaiting for is due in Q3. I guess technically we're in Q4 now, and we're still yet to see exactly what that's going to look like. Yes, and then there's what I fondly refer to as the too many cooks problem. We have a lot of regulators in the EU for data protection, for AI, HDABs coming online, and various competent authorities for NIS2, Data Act, Data Governance Act. Lots of interested parties, and we need to make sure that we are complying with all of their various guidance. The UK has actually got two plans, one a life sciences plan and a health plan, both announced earlier this year. Oh, right, it's not got as much funding, but it's the UK. Let's take what we can at this current political climate. Some wonderful programs. Again, Barry could tell you lots more about these. Very exciting in terms of population and secondary health research. And finally, perhaps 20 years too late, a digital-first approach with the NHS app, which is very welcome. Again, some question marks. So part of the UK strategy talks about changes to COPI. That, for those not familiar with the UK, that's the Health Service Control of Patient Information Regulation 2002. And a change to that legislation will be contentious. Exactly what that looks like is yet to be determined. And again, apparently that's happening in just 12 months' time. And then we have the same questions as we had with the system. Forthcoming changes in NHS reforms. Is this going to apply everywhere, or is this really only England? As I said, there are two plans in scope here, a UK-wide life sciences plan and an England-specific healthcare plan. And you can already see there's a little bit of a mismatch in terms of applicability. We had some wonderful talks on pseudonymisation yesterday. I haven't got time to rehash them in great detail, but I'll just give the high-level overview. Great, we have a judicial precedent. We have something to hang our hat on. Everyone on LinkedIn saying this is clarifying the position, and I perhaps disagree with the word clarification, but something to hang your hat on is something to be celebrated. There are some unknowns still. The case was in the context of a recipient, so there's more complicated relationships involving joint data controllership, for example, that we still don't know exactly how that's going to apply. There's perhaps a perceived conflict between the, let's call them relative and quasi-relative positions of the SIB case and the EDPP guidance. And similarly, perhaps a perceived conflict between the EDPP and the EC, the European Commission, because the EDPP came into the case in support of the EDPS and the European Commission came into the case of on the side of the SRB. It gives a sort of impression of your parents fighting in the room next door. And okay, we don't quite know how that's going to apply in the life sciences sector, but I suppose we'll have to wait and see for more guidance and case law. In the UK, it's a similar picture. It's a relative approach. The ICO has a whose hands approach, very clear in their guidance. And that's aligned with, for example, the HRA, the study-wide governance criteria. Everyone's seeing from that same hymn sheet there, there's not that perception of a conflict or mismatch between guidance and case law. Again, we don't have the sector-specific precedent, but I'm sure that will come in time. Finally, just talking about the laws and the legal framework very briefly, yes, we have some EHDS benefits coming online very shortly, but as Christoph pointed out in his talk earlier, we're also going to have EHDS obligations. If you're a health holder in the EU, you may have considerations about making that data available to the HCABs and third parties. And there are going to be obligations for a range of other EU laws, the AI Act, Data Act, Data Governance Act, if you are in scope of those laws. And these are only of the laws that are coming into effect for the next 5 years, really. We're skipping over the laws that are already in effect, like medical device regulations and NIS2 and a range of others. In the UK, it's a slightly different picture. The direction of travel is more of easing of obligations. We have the Data Use and Access Act defining very clearly the definition of scientific research. It's very welcome. We have, perhaps this could do with a little bit more fleshing out, but the idea of a broad consent fleshed out in the Data Use and Access Act. And a simplified consent procedure coming into play with the UK clinical trial regulations 2025, which could come into effect in April next year. We already have an operational opt-out in the UK, that's the national data opt-out, and averaging about 5% of the country opting out, which is pretty good. I mean, looking at the other way, 94, 95% of the country has not opted out of their data being used for secondary use. So whether or not that survives all the way until we get to the HDRS being operational, that would be lovely if we could, because that will mean a wider population for that secondary use research. And it looks unlikely that the UK is going to bring in AI-specific legislation, at least in the current Parliament, due to politics. Yes, we do have ongoing government and NHS reform considerations, but that's the UK for you. So return to my earlier slide. These are the paradigms I said I'd talk to you about. In general, this is how I see the pros and cons breaking down. I see the EU as being a step ahead in terms of its systems and strategies. I think the EHDS is well funded, and it has a clear strategy as to how that's going to improve over time. The UK could perhaps do with catching up in that regard. On the other hand, I think if you're a global organisation looking to work in the UK or the EU, the UK has a clearer position on pseudonymisation, and the legal framework direction of travel seems to be going in the easing of obligations rather than the reverse. If I leave you with 3 points, it's important to understand these differences. They're only going to get grow in size over the next 5 years as the EU and the UK continue to diverge. So make sure you understand it, make sure your third parties understand it, particularly any timelines and deadlines. And if you have any concerns, talk to a data protection officer and make sure that they're informed and kept in the loop. Thank you so much for your time. I've been Lawrence Carter. If you want to reach me to talk about any of these issues, please do reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much. Thank you. So here, our next speaker, we had to change the order of the presentation. So I know that Natahlie will take the last one because her slides were not uploaded yet. I have here patient-mediated approach to sourcing secondary data. Who was that? Because I don't think I saw the speaker, but I have a speaker, Diana Spagnuolo. Are your slide uploaded?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, then I let you the floor.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that the right one?
No.
No.
No, that's
So-
not the right one. Yeah, I did send it via email yesterday, so I hope they can recognize it if they are listening to me.
Can you tell them how's it called? Or
The name of the file?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had my name on it,
Okay.
Diana Spagnuolo.
Okay, what, sorry, there is your name. What's your name?
Diana,
Diana, okay.
yes.
Okay, 1 minute, please.
No problem.
You know, the situation is called building the plane while you are flying it.
Yes. All right, I see my slides. Oh, there we go. Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Diana Spagnuolo. I will be talking about our current and ongoing research on sharing health data as a driver for digital health certification. Well, this is me. I'm a researcher, a scientist on privacy, data protection, and information security topics in TNO. We are the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. Well, in the Netherlands, The Hague. I have a technical background, so I do a lot of solutions that are meant to comply with the regulation. But I'm pretty sure there are a lot more people here who are more expert in the regulation than I am. So I'm very happy to discuss them, but please be kind. All right, so for today, as I mentioned, we are talking about sharing data for or supporting or driving digital health certification. But before we get there, I want to introduce Biocurity, which is the project we use for context in all this study. There are some challenges we try to address there, so I'm going to contextualize you on that. For this study, to understand whether we can support digital health solution certification, we did some interviews. So I'm also going to show you what we did, the type of people we interviewed, and I'm going to talk to you about some preliminary findings and also our recommendations on what we can do with that. So, well, let's start with the content. As I mentioned, I work in a project called Biocurity. This project has, it's a big consortium. We have basically 3 fronts of this of the work we do. So the first, on the top, you see there that Biocurity aims to develop personalized AI-driven service. So we have several partners working on AI-driven solutions. They use for that, well, the next box, digital biomarkers. We also have partners in this consortium who are first working on developing new digital biomarkers that can help well, predict and also monitor the progression of metabolic syndromes. And we also have partners who develop body sensors. So they are non-invasive. You can think of smartwatches or something that stays in the skin, measuring some of the vital signs of the patient. So they are also using data and trying to develop new digital biomarkers using the sensor data they get from these devices. And we have all of these partners in the consortium. They do have a common goal of working on biomarkers for meds. So we also set up a platform for sharing this data among the partners. This is the third box you see there in green. The idea of this platform is to create something that, of course, enables or ensures privacy, data security, but also data sovereignty. This is where I work, by the way, me and my colleagues. We do that through a bit of a, well, we proposed an architecture to do all of that. I'm not going to dive into too much details on this architecture, but I'm very happy to discuss it if you have any questions about any specific component here. We can talk on the break. But what I want to show here is that we have envisioned for this collaboration an architecture where data that is collected by either sensor providers that you see there on top, or data that is collected by, let's say, hospital clinics directly using primary, so data that is result of healthcare, which you also see on top. So the 2 boxes on top, data stays there. We are not redistributing data. It remains there. What we introduce here on the bottom is the control by the patient or by the data subject. They do have, so the bit of architecture that we add to this environment is the concept of a wallet, or the patient or the data subjects. They store all their preferences, also known as consent. So this is where they say, I authorize my data, only this part of my data, or the whole of my data, or my data up until a certain time or before a certain time, to be used by research or by other categories of studies, including, so not only limited to scientific research, but also research that may lead to commercial medical devices. They have the control. They can opt out, opt in. They can do the level of granularity that fits their purpose. So it is a bit of a complicated consent model. On one hand, complicated. On the other hand, we think it's the only fair way to mix scientific research and commercial research. So patient stays in control of their choices, but the data itself remains with with the sensor providers or with the clinics. They only have a piece of authorization in what we call this wallet, similar to what is being proposed with the European wallet in EIDAS. So this is the platform or architecture we worked on to, or that we proposed to work on the challenges of, first, low trust on sharing this data. There is a lot of resistance from partners who want to share data because they know that data can be valuable, well, if reused. But there is a lot of fear of non-compliance in doing so. And also slow adoption, because we know, as well, we noticed that there is, well, some friction or perhaps some yeah, I don't want to say fear, but it is kind of a resistance. Resistance is a better word. In using this kind of environment in healthcare. So there is resistance from the hospitals, clinics, or into using, let's say, this kind of data that comes from everywhere. So, of course, we worked with our partners. We believe this is an architecture that could work out, but there's still a bit of a piece that is missing. So the whole architecture is meant to share data in order to foster more research, more innovation, but there is one bit of one piece of the puzzle, which is new solutions that one may come up by using the data that is shared in this platform. If the idea is that this is marketed somehow in the future, one has to think about certification. So can a solution that is created using this platform be certified? So can we certify solutions that reuse data? So that's, well, then we set out to find out. We thought this is time to be more practical. Let's talk to the experts in the field. So we did some interviews to understand if and how we can support regulatory certification of this potential new medical devices or solutions that may come out of such platform. And of course, our hypothesis is that having this ecosystem that enables a trustworthy data sharing across all the providers would somehow help. All right, so we did, as I hinted, some interviews. They are semi-structured. We asked some broad questions about challenges faced when going about certification of new digital health solutions, as well as some opportunities they see in reusing real-world data, and well, conditions they thought were needed in order for this ecosystem to work. We interviewed 10 experts in digital health solutions. All of them are at least familiar with the process of certification, but 5 of them are either directly responsible for certifying their own products, or in a supportive role, like providing all the documentation, for instance, creating the dossier. As I mentioned, this is an ongoing analysis, although at this point we are very close to finishing it. When I submitted the paper, we're still wrapping up 1 or 2 interviews. So let's jump to what we found out. So first, some general insights. We did confirm with our interviewees that there is so there are some challenges when it comes to regulatory certification of digital health solutions. First of all, the certification is it takes a long time and is resource intensive. We hear particularly from small and medium enterprises, that this is a challenge for them, because during the time they are applying for certification, that may take months to resolve all the process, or they cannot market their solution and they have to stay afloat. Of course, they're their costs in keeping the company running. The procedure also is not well suited for data-driven solutions. So it's meant, so that is because data-driven solutions are more softer. You can imagine something like monitoring or predictive models. They are updated frequently. And then if the process for certification is long, frequent updates are incompatible, basically. And finally, that real-world data, which means data that is collected outside this controlled environment of a clinical trial. So a lot of our interviewees recognize the potential that this data have, but there is still also some resistance in using it because lacking process. So basically, there is no safe way to say I used real-world data to show the efficacy of my product, and this is going to be accepted. So if you read all of that, to me, it sounds like this is in clash with what we're seeing nowadays, with the trend of simpler and faster. You simplified or reduced the regulatory burden, particularly for the small and medium enterprises. I know that the simpler and faster EU doesn't necessarily cover certification of medical devices, for instance, but it sounds off trend. Well, now some of the challenges, though these slides are going to be heavy, but no worries. First of all, interviews mentioned poor data quality as one of the challenges. But the detail here is not that people believe data, real-world data, is of poor quality. That actually, what they're highlighting is that the lack of annotations around this data is what makes them of lower quality. So there is, of course, some tension, some fear of reusing data that is not well annotated. So the suggestion here is basically not that you should expect data to be of 100% perfect. I like the second quote because it says that the real world is messy. You can change it, you can describe it, but you can change it. And I fully agree with that. And there are some very, several occasions people mention examples where, for instance, let's say it's data coming from a sensor, wrist type of watch that people use during the day, but then they remove to go to bed. So this is missing data overnight. Right? You don't have any data coming from this, 8-10 hours during the day. But you may be interested in what happens when people are active, which means when they are walking, doing exercises, etc., probably not during the night. So yes, there is missing data, but no, it doesn't matter for your study if your study has these conditions of, I'm looking at activity. So basically, it is mostly about annotating data. This is already hinted in the first slides. So there is a friction with frequent updates on software that is particularly when it's data-driven, and the recertification. The interviewees mentioned that is actually quite lengthy process just for an update. Some organizations are individually trying to talk to some of the notified bodies to see whether there's a way to around this waiting time for a recertification. But of course, we also look for opportunities. What can we do about this? So first of all, what we hear from our participants is that real-world data, or if data can be reused in this setting, it means that we can have evidence that goes beyond accuracy. For instance, there is some mention about risk management. This, I think, aligns really well with post-market surveillance, where you have some device that is certified, but now you need to, in future iterations, you want to have a risk management plan for what happens if the device is misused, or what happens if there is a wrong diagnosis based on data that comes from your device. Of course, this can only happen if you use data from people, real people that are using the device. You can study whether this was a proper use or not. You can understand what are the diagnosis and what has happened. But also beyond the original context-specific claims, we also hear things like, for instance, the fact that lifestyle information and socioeconomical context of these patients also matter a lot beyond the pure clinical, beyond beyond the health condition of the patient, things beyond that go outside the clinical trial setting. That is not very well. It's rare that this happens, the combination of all these cohorts of data, but that could be really valuable. As well as reducing complexity and costs. Of course, we know clinical trials are very costly. So here, the interviewees are pointing out that maybe if we could carry evidence across applications, it would accelerate at least recertification. And this is my last slide. So, in conclusion, it seems like sharing real-world data has potential to accelerate. So having this platform has potential, of course, to accelerate and facilitate digital health certification. We do believe that structured evidence will enable a more efficient assessment, although this is not there yet. So I put here as our recommendation, we would like to see this happening. It's a hybrid certification pathway. So I'm not proposing that we ditch clinical trials. No, they are there. They should be there for accuracy and safety. But perhaps for further iterations or continuous maintenance of certification, we could introduce reuse of evidence. For instance, we've previously validated, or evidence that is enriched by real-world data. And that was it for me. If you have any questions, please find me in the coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you very much. So now I will call the next speaker about nationally harmonized contractual framework for secondary use of health data in multi-center project in Switzerland. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a horrible title, I know, but it's about... I don't see the slides yet on the screen. Well, anyhow, I start anyway. Yes, you see, it's a terrible title, but it's actually about the overwhelm of contracts in connection with the secondary use of health data. And I would like to tell you a little bit about how we try to slice the elephant in Switzerland. My name is Judith Kirsch-Blind. I am legal officer for SPHN. SPHN, if you haven't heard Julia Maurer's speech yesterday, who already introduced our institution, is an initiative under the leadership of the Swiss Academy of Medical Sciences in close collaboration with the Institute for Bioinformatics. And our goal is to make health-related data interoperable, shareable for research. And we have also a very close look on the legal and ethical implications. You know, Switzerland is a very small country, but we like a challenge. That's why we also have, for instance, 4 national languages. But not sufficient with the 4 national languages, we also have our federal data protection law and additional 25 cantonal data protection laws. There are 25, not 26, because we have 26 cantons, but 2 cantons have joined forces. Additionally, we have the special laws such as the Human Research Act and its ordinances. The challenges in connection with this are not the applicability, as Christoph was talking this morning about in the EU, how it is. It's more the different views of the different cantons. We have the several institutions and interpretations, and you know how it is, you have 5 lawyers and 25 opinions. The main aspects that have to be covered contractually, we can group them in 2 groups. One is the project-specific aspects, which are like the responsibilities, the governance, IP, publications, and so forth, financing. And the second block is the one that we are focusing on here at our conference, are the data protection aspects, the responsibilities of controllers, processors, all the data protection principles, and what is very important for SPHN is the possible access for reuse. The problem is obvious, the complexity, as mentioned and as everybody knows. But this leads also to very lengthy negotiations, which might last between 6 and 12 months, which has very negative consequences for every project. It has a negative impact on the timelines and on the administrative burden. There are institutional data governance requirements which might also hinder the multi-center research projects. And there is no standardized approach for this multi-institutional data sharing. So the solution we try to come up with is a standardized legal template, agreement template, which has been developed with our SPHN Data Governance Working Group. The members of this working group are professionals from the Swiss university hospitals, the Swiss universities, as well from the ETH domain. And not only did we put a lot of brain work into these templates, but we also checked how they are working in real life. During 8 years, we have refined them in multi-institutional projects. So we have 3 key components. It's a modular approach we have chosen, and the 3 modules are described here quickly. The main module would be the consortium agreement, handling the first block of what I was showing before, like the principles of collaboration, IP, financing, and all that stuff. And then the 2 other modules covered data protection aspects. The second is the data transfer and use agreement, where we have all the security measures and the purpose of the processing, rules for international data transfer if there is an international collaboration, and the duty for non-re-identification and data subject rights and liabilities. The third data transfer and processing agreement is one that was thought of especially in relation with trusted research environments. So if you have an external processor, you might also take this module and attach it. The clear benefit of this modular approach is one, it's predictable. You have a clear framework which has been agreed upon in a common language with all those institutions. And this modular system allows a mix and match. So you can take one module and leave the other away, or also you can adapt one of the modules as you like for your project or as you need for your project. And especially this would allow more a focus on the scientific perspective than on the legal overwhelm. The practical aspect is the template is available on our website, which you can see up here. And we have also accompanying documentation to it, which can help. And as mentioned before, these templates can be adapted to various collaboration. They can be also adapted for international collaboration if you adapt the laws accordingly. But you can use it as a kind of a checklist. So the conclusion is slicing the elephant can be successful because it can overcome the barriers created by this huge fragmentation in Switzerland, which I think it might be analog to the EU. And it can really enable a model for enabling secure, ethical, and collaborative health research. However, the ongoing dialogue is very key, and there might be also the need for a potential legislative measures to make the responsible sharing of data further possible. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please come up in the break.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will call our last speaker of this session. I'm afraid our lunch break will be reduced a little bit because the next session will we cannot reduce it too much. So, Natahlie, we try to do it in 10 minutes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. So, Eric, please, can you put on my slides? So the topic of today is DPO and AI officer, one and the same. So let's be clear, this topic is a tribute, I think, to all DPOs, brothers and sisters around the world. I feel you. I am a data protection lawyer, but before that, I have been a DPO for many years in different big or small institutions, mainly in the pharma sector. So I know what it's like to be a DPO. So what I did on this slide is try to summarize for you the key element of what a DPO is. And as I said, this is a tribute to how powerful DPOs actually are, you know. So the DPO superhero is actually doing already so much that it's a good question to ask, do you have time to actually do more and now become an AI officer? So that's the question. To answer this question, I think it's really important to focus on what the DPO is already doing and understand already the scope and the extent of all the tasks. So as you can see, there is already so much. I think by now most companies know, do they need a DPO? So that's the first question, is the designation. Then you have in GDPR already so much information on what a DPO should be doing. You have information on the professional qualities. So indeed, DPO, they need to be expert. But not only on legal topics. And when I say legal topics, I mean GDPR, the national law, the EHDPC guidelines. Don't forget about the case laws. Really important case laws are coming. But you should also understand the business and your sector. So that's already a lot of professional qualities. The DPO must be involved in all issues. That's, of course, something that the GDPR is telling us. Should have sufficient resource. And when I say resource, I mean time and money, and maybe staff as well. So that's already something to keep in mind. Do you have your own DPO budget? I'm not sure. Who has a DPO budget here? So, okay, good to know. Then there is the question of independence of DPOs. Yes, indeed, DPOs, they should be independent. They shouldn't receive instructions from the management. Is that the case? Not always. There should be no conflict of interest. I know so many DPOs who are also head of compliance, head of legal, head of HR. I hope nowadays it's not the case anymore because there has been so many decisions from data protection authorities around this, so we should really pay attention to conflict of interest. And then last but not least, there is the question of the reporting. How many hierarchy levels are between you as a DPO and the management? So yes, the DPO is really busy. I'm not going to go into the whole detail of what he's doing. Here, I drafted for you the job description of our DPO, and indeed, he's really, really busy. So that's an interesting slide. Here, I summarized for you what the EDPB is saying on the DPO function. And because there is an interesting document from EDPB from last year on the DPO function, and you find there some recommendation for data protection authorities, some recommendation for controllers and processors, and it's mentioned notably that the DPO should have time also to get expertise on the digital package of regulation from the European Commission. So that's already a hint that the DPO should also focus not only on GDPR, but on the DSA, the DMA, the DGA, the Data Act, EHDS, and so forth. So that's already a lot to do as well for DPOs. But if you look at the AI Act, then you find that there's actually not an obligation to have an AI officer. So that's something probably that we should also explain to the management of our companies. AI officer in itself is not an existing function. What we have in the AI Act is an AI function. Why? Because there are so many compliance obligations that in any case, somebody should take care of it. But should it be the DPO? What do you think? Well, if you look at what this AI function should be doing, so this AI officer, you see there is a lot, right? You know that AI Act is a product safety regulation, so very different from GDPR. And when you look at what AI officers should be doing, you see that there are obligations, I would say, to map your AI system, to have a good system of risk management, audit, notification obligations to regulatory bodies. And then you have the whole AI literacy package of obligation. If you look at the AI Act, it says that organizations and companies should train their staff around AI, not only legal aspects, but also ethical aspects. And so at the end, what you find is that if you compare both, you see that there are indeed similarities. And it's a fact that if you want to be a good DPO, you should understand what is AI and what is the AI Act. But the AI function goes it goes beyond, I would say, because AI is not only about personal data, it's also about non-personal data. And it's also not only about legal topics, but also about ethical topics. So definitely those are two different functions. And I will make it quick because Pierre-Yves is looking at me very intensively. What do we find around this, the way that organizations are managing this AI function? What you find is 3 types of models. So most of the time, it's not the DPO who's managing this. It's an oversight body, a compliance ethical AI body. Sometimes it's centralized, so it's one team who's managing it for the whole organization. Sometimes it's decentralized, so it's within departments that you would have like AI officer here and there. And sometimes hybrid, a bit of a mix of both. So I leave it up to you to decide what is best. I have my opinion, but we can discuss this on the side. And then who should be involved then in this AI governance or this AI function? Well, what you find most of the time, in any case, is a cross-functional committee in which you will have definitely the DPO and the chief privacy, the chief privacy officer, the compliance officer, but then you would have also an ethical function involved. Sometimes you would have people from quality and then from IT. and then also from other head of departments. So it's really like a cross-functional committee that should be put in place and that will work with the buy-in of the leadership in any case. And this is the end of my presentation. And I'm really looking forward to discuss this with you during the break. How do you cope? How do you manage? And how, maybe tips and tricks on to survive as a DPO in these very challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. Thank you. Well, actually, if I think of the short presentation we had, I think that we have enough topics for at least 5 days of discussion and a number of webinars. So we will be working on organizing that. But without further delay, I would like to leave the stage for my friend Sébastien and his panel. And Sébastien, you can go into the lunch break. We will shorten it. It's better for our shape anyway. Oh, by the way, the session about the session on the top is cancelled. I see that people are going. Yes, we have an issue. The 3 speakers have all declined last minute. So we have. I'm absolutely sorry about that. Mats it's difficult for him to be the chair of a session with no speakers.
So thank you. I hope you will not regret staying in this session. So good morning to all. It's a great pleasure and great honor to be with you here for this session. We are starting a little bit late, and I have to say we have such amazing speakers. I'm afraid we will be also a little bit late to conclude the session. Still waiting for... And Ioannis is arriving. So, good morning to all. We will be discussing, sharing some latest updates, evolution in the field of GDPR certification and GDPR codes of conduct. You will see that it's moving very actively, very fast. Quite a number of developments which are interesting to be shared. And in order to do so, we have the pleasure to have, first of all, Dorothea Alessandra Di Marco, who is officer at the Italian Data Protection Authority, so Garante Protezione dei Dati. We have the great pleasure to have Ioannis Matsakis, who is Vice President of EU-CROF, Christophe Van Quen, who is of Convention on Burling of Council, and then Christophe Maes, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Christophe Maes, or Maes, who is manager at IHD. Is that correct? So, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Dorothea to present, give you an overview of the perspective of the authority on certification and code of conduct. We'll try to be efficient. We have a lot to present, but I think it's very important to start with the vision of the authority. Okay. Dorothea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'll give you a short, very brief overview of the GDPR certification system, that has some slight differences with the system of certification operating in the market with standards and so on. So first of all, we have the legal framework is the GDPR. We refer in the recital, you see the compliance, the keyword is compliance for certification and code of conduct. We have a lot of articles also referring to certification and code of conduct as tools, elements to demonstrate compliance, to enforce measures, and so on. So, the 2 important articles are the 42 and 43 for the certification and 40 and 41 for code of conduct and monitoring body. The accreditation requirement is a tricky topic because the regulation adds to the international standard 17065 additional requirements established by authorities in case the authorities delegate the national accreditation body to perform the accreditation process. So each authorities, in case, establish national additional requirements for the accreditation. So the accreditation could be slightly different, have some differences depending on the member states you are accrediting. You are accredited. The most important keywords for certification are that it's a voluntary process, so it's not mandatory for the GDPR. It's a tool for controller, an element for controller and processor to demonstrate compliance of the obligation, to the respect of obligation. Is a tool of accountability to enhance transparency and enforce trust from the citizens, because a controller or processor with a certification has more trust because the personal data are processed are in a way respectable of requirements of a scheme of certification approved by the authority and so on. And this performed and tested by a third party. This third party is a certification body that is independent, that is impartial, and those requirements are checked by the accreditation body, so another third party. And the certification is issued on the basis of approved certification criteria or scheme. And this is maybe the main tricky topic. This is the definition of certification scheme under the ISO world, so the standardization world. But we have some differences that I represent in those two slides. This is the current market certification system. So you have an applicant, an organization applying for a certification, you have a certification body, and then you have an accreditation body, okay? So this is the operating system under this, using a European norm or international norm as ISO standards. And the goal is to obtain the certification, that the certificate is valid for 3 years, maintained every year with inspection, documental, on-site inspections, and so on. In the GDPR world, we have some differences. We have the applicant, that is the organization, could be a controller, a processor, also a joint controller, but it is most complicated to manage. We have the certification body. The certification body in such cases could be also the supervisory authorities. And the accreditation body that could be, in some cases, it depends on member states' decision of the authorities, can be the supervisory authorities. So there is an input on the supervisory authority in this environment, in this context. And the certification is based, as I told before, on the certification scheme. And the certification scheme should be adopted, approved by the authority. Those are some documents to be referred, to be studied, and also some ISO standards on conformity assessment. That is a very important topic in ISO world. Just to understand better this kind of word and what are the tasks, the topics, and so on. This is our internal procedure for the adoption of a certification scheme. It is very complicated. For the national scheme, the supervisory authority proposed a decision to the DPB. The DPB can make comment or recommendation, and then at the end, following the coherence mechanism, there is an opinion of approving the decision of the supervisory authority, and then the scheme is approved under the 42 paragraph 5 of the GDPR, and then the certification body can be accredited under the scheme, and after the applicant can be certified under the scheme. For the EU seal, there is at European EHDPB level adoption, and there is two volunteer from two different supervisory authorities as co-reviewers. There is the supervisory authority competent for the establishment of the scheme owner. That could be a private body, a public body, an association, a consortium, and Sebastian can explain better, because Europrivacy is the first European seal under the Article 42 approved by the board, and then the board opinion. So you have a seal, a mechanism applied and certifiable every member states. So of course, certification bodies should be accredited under the European seals. As Europrivacy, for example, is accredited in Italy, and we have one certification body already accredited and two ongoing, and some applicant already certified under Europrivacy, and other asking, applying for the certification. So this is I skip the code of conduct because it is maybe out of my scope. Those are the three code of conducts approved by the DPB at European level. I want just to give you some input for the professional certification that are not certification under the Article 42, but and follows accreditation requirement on in different ISO norm. You see the 17024, but are for DPOs or privacy professional could be important as tool to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and abilities. We push at European level as Italy, the European norm 7040, adding a new profiles, because we started in Italy as an Italian standard with 4 profiles. And the target is the DPOs and all professional privacy professionals. And we refer also to those profiles in our accreditation requirement as explication note. It's not mandatory to have this certification, but can help to demonstrate our additional requirements of competencies of resources of personnel involved in certification process. Just to have an idea, we have 5 profiles. There are some access requirements on formal qualification, so degree of study, the training, and the working experience. Of course, in the field of the matters of data protection, security, and so on. Those are the profiles, and the DPO is the most, in Italy, the most asked and certified. We are more than 300 professionals certified. And there are this is the exam. There are a written exam and an oral exam, and then you'll be certified, and you have to maintain the certification also with for the permanent update. You have different ways, refresh course to be a speaker, teaching, writing articles, and so on. So at the moment, I think I respect the time and give the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothea. I think it was a very good introduction. Let me now give you a little bit more details on the first mechanism, so the European Data Protection Seal under GDPR, and a little bit where we are, what is the future, so the upcoming developments. So first of all, my name is Sebastian Ziegler. I have the pleasure to serve as chair of the International Board of Experts for Europrivacy at ECCP. And ECCP was established through the European Research Program by research projects to support transfer from research to the market, in particular for certification compliance and to demonstrate compliance with different regulations. EuroPC has been approved, as it was mentioned by Dorothea. The criteria have been approved under Article 42 already in 2022. But after you get the criteria approved, you need also to ensure that you have a common accreditation procedure. You can align with the national accreditation bodies. So first, for the criteria, we started the research 13 years ago, by the way, before the GDPR. Then once we worked, so we were working with CDPB to agree on common criteria. It was very interesting. It took time, but it enabled to really discuss each and every criterion to ensure that you have something which is aligned with the expectation, not only with the Commission, the expectation of the Commission, but the expectation of 30 national authorities. So EU plus European Economic Areas. This took time, but enabled us to increase the quality of the criteria. So it was very interesting, took time, but qualitatively it contributed to increase the quality. And then we needed 2 additional years to have, this time, 46 national authorities to agree on the accreditation process, because in many countries in Europe, the implementation of the Article 43 is led by national accreditation bodies and not by the supervisory authorities. So it took time. Now, something very interesting to bear in mind, if you read the GDPR, you will see that you have mainly 4 mechanisms available to the private sector. You have an additional one for public bodies, but let's focus on the 4 most relevant one, the one you find in Article 46, for instance. And then when you look at the number of references to this mechanism in the GDPR, standard contractual clauses, only 7 references in the GDPR. Then you will see binding corporate rules, 25, and then you have 2 mechanisms that are above the 2 orders, which are the Code of Conducts with 36 references, and Certification 73. It's more than all the orders together. And you have the list of the articles where you find it and the recitals. And why? Why is there a difference? And this comes is directly related to the fact that the 2 last mechanisms, codes of conduct and certifications, are mechanisms that imply an effective control by third parties. You can have, probably you already have thousands of companies in China, perhaps even North Korea, who have signed SCCs. It's very simple to sign an SCC. You have absolutely no guarantee that what has been signed is effectively implemented. A major difference, qualitative difference with Code of Conduct and certification scheme is that you have auditors who come to check and to assess that it is effectively complying, that company data processing is effectively complying with the requirements. You have quite a number of other differences. For instance, certification is mentioned under Article 25 to demonstrate data protection by design and by default. Code of Conduct and certification are mentioned for Article 24, for Article 28, 32, to demonstrate compliance. It's a very powerful mechanism. It's not only a mechanism to demonstrate compliance, it has legal effect, meaning that, for instance, if you're a data controller and you're sharing data with a data processor, you are liable for anything which will happen with your data processors. You have to do due diligence. You have to go and check, control that you have all the security measures in place and so on. Code of conduct and certification are recognized as adequate mechanism to contribute to demonstrate this compliance, meaning that you reduce also the legal risk for the entities which are using this mechanism. Very important. I will go very quickly on this, but what is maybe I will skip it. I will just show you the slide, but not spending time. What are the reasons and the motivations for companies to go into a certification? So you have the reduction of risk, you have to demonstrate the compliance, to improve the reputation, and so on. One element which is important, and that's something we saw with, it was a positive surprise, that quite a number of companies are using the certification not so much to demonstrate, communicate compliance to third parties, but to reduce uncertainty internally. For the DPO to be able to demonstrate that things have been properly done, to reduce the internal risk, to reassure the board of directors, to reassure sometimes the shareholders, the investor, that no, it's under control. We had an impartial, independent third parties who came to check, ensure that everything was correct and on track. It can be extended to other non-EU jurisdictions. I will go through it very quickly. You have some already, quite a few now front runners who have started to adopt and embrace the certification. So we had the first one, I think, last year, and then this year it really started. Again, because we had to wait for the accreditation procedure to be approved. But then we have quite a number of certification bodies who want to deliver certification. Some of them managed to go through the Article 43. Some of them are still waiting. And they have clients. Some of them have clients ready since 2 years. But they're just waiting to get the validation under Article 43. So it took time, but it's really coming now. So you can already see some testimonials from different early adopters of the certification. And the good news that we saw, it was not only large companies, we had startups, we have semi-public bodies, we have all kinds of actors who have started to use the certification, and we see it's really transversal. So it's a very good news for us too. So now that's what we, after having the feedbacks from the users, some of the key motivators and drivers. Of course, reduction of risk is very important, but the value creation, saving costs, I mentioned Article 28, to avoid spending a lot of time and resources for due diligence and so on, for instance, to simplify, homogenize the management procedures, but to value compliance. And that's a very important element. I will come back to this because often the work of the DPO is not always recognized as a source of value creation for the company. It's often perceived as, we need to have a DPO, it's an obligation, so it's a center of cost, and that's it. And then usually the board of directors look at the DPO when there is an issue, when the CNIL or an authority says, I want to make an inspection. Say, what did you do? Why do we have an inspection? Are you ready? Are we? But it's often regarded as something very peripheral. And the good news and the thing which is very interesting with the certification, that it's a mechanism that enables to value the compliance as a source of competitive advantage, source of value creation, of revenues. And we had quite already a few DPOs who came back to us to say it completely changed the interaction relationship with the board of directors, with the direction. Because instead of seeing compliance as a cost, they start seeing it as a source of value creation for the company. To build trust and reputation, of course, to simplify, because then you can use criteria which have been approved by 30 national authorities to homogenize the way you monitor, you check, you document your compliance, but you can also extend it to non-EU jurisdictions. And I will come back to this in a while, and then to make it more enjoyable. And that's really one of our ambitions. Sometimes people are smiling, but we really consider that there's no reason to make compliance complicated, hurting or stressing. It should be as natural as keeping accounting in line with the rules. So the idea is how to make compliance as user-friendly, as easy to implement as possible, and easy to communicate as possible. What do you need very quickly? Fundamentally, the certification scheme is designed to assess the compliance with the regulation. So what you need is to comply with the regulation. To ensure that you comply, then you need to have a DPO and record of data processing activities. Not because it's mandatory under the law, but because when we designed the scheme, we thought it was important that if you deliver a certification to a company, that this company at least has a person in charge of compliance, and at least knows what personal data it is processing. So we decided, even if it's not always mandatory, that is a requirement which is embedded in the scheme, even for a small SME. There must be someone in charge, and there must be a knowledge of what personal data process. And then you need to document your GDPR compliance with the criteria. Other element which is important, under certification, both the DG Justice and EDPB decided that it was not possible to certify a whole company, that it was not realistic, not trustable. You need to certify effective data processing activities. So you can cluster different data processing, but what you certify is the compliance of certain set of data processing activities. It can be customer support, it can be clinical research, whatever, but you need to define and you need really to assess compliance of this data processing with the rules, with the regulation. The good news is that you can start by your priority data processing, and then you can progressively extend it. You can also use the criteria to document your compliance without going to the certification, and then you can decide when you want to certify. So it's very flexible. It really enables you to put first things first. How does it work in practice? What is the life cycle? First of all, the good news is that the most demanding part is to comply with the GDPR, to ensure that you are complying with the regulation, and that you need to do it anyway, regardless of any certification. Then you start checking and documenting your compliance with criteria, which is a way to check and reduce the risk for your entity, whether it is a public or private entity. Then you certify, which enables to value the compliance, and then you maintain to keep it always aligned with the requirements. Which means that if you look in terms of life cycle, most of the effort is done before even starting the certification, which is a very good news. Then you have already a return by reducing the risk, by documenting, identifying potential blind spots in your compliance and addressing them. And then you really start valuing. So it really transforms the perception of compliance from, again, something I have to do to an opportunity that can create value for the company and for the DPhil. We have a whole set of resources online. I will skip that. Now, just a few words very quickly on the extensions. We are currently working with EDPB to extend your privacy to Article 46 and Article 42 worldwide. So it's progressing. We have very interesting interactions with EDPB. We are on a very good track, and we hope, hopefully, by end of Q1 to have great news to share with you. Of course, it will depend on EDPB members. They still need to approve, but that's in progress. And that would, if EDPB agrees with the new version, the revision of the criteria, to deliver certification worldwide and to ensure that we can extend this mechanism of compliance and accountability to entities which are outside of Europe, which is very important. We also worked very early on addressing non-EU regulation, because we know that many companies need to demonstrate compliance not only with Europe, with the GDPR, but they are sometimes working with Brazil, India, Japan, and other countries. And they need also to comply with the regulation of these other countries. So we have a model where we have for each of these major regulations additional criteria, which enables you to use Europe and the GDPR criteria, plus a few additional ones to address other regulations if you are active globally. We also worked with the Council of Europe, with European and non-European authorities to propose and develop a scheme which is the equivalent of the European one, but not under GDPR, to be geographically neutral, meaning that countries like Canada, Japan, if they want to use a certification mechanism, instead of starting from scratch, they can use a geographically neutral version of what we developed in Europe, made available to any jurisdictions to be able to also certify compliance. So it's not a GDPR certification, it's not recognized under the GDPR, but it's very similar. It's the same level of requirements, same methodology, same approach, but one is under GDPR, the other one is independent of the GDPR, but it is addressing other regulation. It is aligned with Convention 108+, with the Malabo Convention, with the Asian framework, with the Ibero-American PDPS, and so on. So really the idea was to propose something universal so that other countries can align on the European approach. We also worked on quite a number of other regulations through European research projects to deliver also criteria to address compliance with the AI Act, with CRA, NIS2, and so on, with the same methodology, meaning that you can use the same methodology to extend it to other regulations. So you have the AI Act. I forgot to mention that interprivacy has been endorsed by IAF, which is the International Accreditation Forum, where you have 96 national accreditation authorities. So it's already also endorsed internationally. AIA said, for instance, is going through IAF now. We have also developed a dedicated scheme on ethics by design that can be interesting. It's a scheme which was born from a research project on medical research on how to address the ethical approach. And one of the challenges we face, that ethics can be very culturally related or technology related or domain specific. So what we did, we analyzed over, I think, about 50 regional and international standards on ethics. We compared all of them and we extracted all the requirements which were shared by a majority of them. So whenever more than half of these international and regional standards identified common requirements, we took them to have a kind of synthetic scheme that enables to assess compliance with the ethical principle. We are so soon releasing, but I thought it was important to mention it, through another European research project on medical research and cancer. We are working on a scheme to assess compliance of medical data transfer. So if you want to certify that you can share data or you can receive medical data, to have a dedicated mechanism, it is not limited to GDPR, but which is a kind of omnibus certification addressing different regulatory obligations, such as EHDS, Data Act, Data Governance Act, AI Act, and so on. Again, it's not an official certification under GDPR, but that can help a lot medical researchers to reduce the risk and to communicate with a third-party evaluation their compliance. You have a QR code for the white paper on GDPR certification. Feel free to scan it. It is available in English, French, Italian, Spanish, Japanese, and quite a number of languages already, and it's being extended. And last but not least, we all invite you, and we have the pleasure to work closely with EHDPC, with EFDPO, and other partners to help organizing and supporting international dialogue through the Privacy Symposium in Venice, where we have dedicated track for medical data. We have a dedicated track for DPOs, also with Pierre-Yves and many other colleagues, as well as a whole set of the program on accountability, trusted international data transfer, and certification. So very welcome to join and to engage in dialogue, conversation with regulators from Europe and other parts of the world. And now I'm the great pleasure to give the floor to Christophe Maes, who will present another perspective more focused, I think, on the codes of conduct. So I give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. I will speed up a little bit because, yes, I know, Pierre-Yves, time is running. My story started already 8 years ago when I wanted to bring a medical device on the market, in the EU market, 2 devices to be exact. So we prepared with an engineering company, with medical doctors, so we did all the development, and then everything was tested, and then off we go. No, it was not off we go. All of a sudden, there was another organization. So to bring it on the market, at the end, we had to pass HTA bodies, so the health technology assessment bodies. They had to approve appraisal, give appraisal for, okay, you can put it on the market, and we give an advice to the authorities so we could apply for reimbursement and all these things. That's when the story started, with also within IHD, when there was a project, and it's a project about harmonizing the HTA assessments, health technology assessments, all over Europe. So we went into that story, and at the end, there are 2 big projects going on, harmonizing all the different HTA bodies. It was already such a very nice, let's say, all the presentations today and yesterday, they all provide things that, yeah, we are not unified. It's Europe, but absolutely we are not unified. So, but maybe health technology assessment bodies, they were unified, or they do the same things. No, they don't, of course not. So, first of all, what do they do? There are a lot of things. I won't go into detail because at the end I want some actions from you, some no physical actions, but some mental, so intellectual actions. So I will go through these slides rather quickly. So what do the HTA bodies do? So they all do different things. We did a survey all over Europe. That was another company or another institution who did that. So, but there are 4 main things. They scope, just looking at what kind of medical device or digital health tool, whatever, you are going to develop or you're developed. So what's the scope? What are you bringing new to the field? What's the difference between yours and the existing things? So you have to collect evidence that proves why you should be on the market, what's your advantage, why they should reimburse you compared to the other ones or in line with the other ones. they evaluate the evidence you provide as a developer, and then at the end they give a report or they give an appraisal to the authorities who can decide, okay, your device can be used or can be reimbursed, can go finally onto the market. So there are different responsibilities, which I won't go into detail, even that one. But from the project point of view, so what is the project about? It's about harmonizing the HTA assessment methods. So it's a little bit the same as the Europrivacy. They try to, you try to harmonize all the different aspects, criteria. So, but from the HTA body, the starting point is, of course, the classification, it's the taxonomy. So there's a working group dealing with that. Then we have also the life cycle, because during the life cycle you have different stages, and it's obvious, or we from our side of the game, it is obvious for us that GDPR-related data protection related aspects differs all through the life cycle, because type of data are different in the beginning than at the end when you go live or when you are on the market. So there are different life cycle aspects that we have to take into account. So the HTA bodies, they do most of the things they do is the economic value, it's the medical value, what's the difference between you and the other ones. You just have to prove the evidence, the medical evidence. So it's also about safety, cybersecurity aspects, the clinical effects, and the economic aspects, as I mentioned. But then, from an IHD point of view, from data, that's a little bit where we came into the game. Hey, where are we? GDPR, where is that assessed? How do you know who does these things? And during the project, only 1 year, we found it's a real vacuum. HTA body said, that's not of our business. That's another authority. Asking to the other authorities, no, that's not really. We only come into play when there are issues. So then we come into play, but on beforehand, we definitely have a vacuum. So that's. We did a survey, we did a literature review, we did some interviews, and we also visited all the different websites available, publicly available. Me, as a developer, I want to go onto the market, not only in Belgium, from Belgium, but also in France, Germany, whatever. What differences are there if I want to go onto the market within 3 or 4 countries? We did a search on the websites, and as a developer, you saw that HTA bodies, all of them, they touched partially items related to data privacy, data protection. Very, very partially, very high level. As a developer, I really did not know, how can I be compliant in Belgium and France? What do I have to do? So that was a very scattered ecosystem. All these different domains, subdomains, as mentioned on the slide, we found. But never we found a totally GDPR-proved, compliant questionnaire, survey, proof of evidence. So that is when we started within the project, and that's one of the items. And it's very strange. We were allocated under the group specialist topics. So that was a little bit out of their scope. It's not in their framework. It's not in their workflow, together with data privacy, but even with cybersecurity aspects. So we were in the data specialist aspect. So we looked at all the different regulations, the different acts, where I, as a developer, my DHT should be compliant to. So, of course, you know them better than I do. So, at the end, We are not at the end, but we are just starting. We provided, or we developed, we created in collaboration with stakeholders, starting from the GDPR, we had 250 requirements for a DHT developer, because it's also already mentioned, if you read the GDPR as a lawyer, you understand, but now I have the clue that you even do not understand it. But as a developer, it's even harder. Yeah, you start at page 0, page 3, you are asleep immediately. Because what do I have to do? I want to give a proof of evidence. What do you need? Yeah, it's different in different countries, but even in one country, for example, Germany, different, or Switzerland, I heard how many cantons, I don't remember anymore, 26, whatever. So they can have different HDA bodies, different proof of evidence. So as a developer, yeah, you stop developing, of course. So we started with 250. We went back to the HDA bodies. They said, are you crazy? Are we going to check 250 items as a proof of evidence, knowing, yes, if you have that proof of evidence, you should be compliant with GDPR. But I know you never can be compliant with GDPR, yeah. Having heard the lawyers here. So HDA body said, okay, we have to reduce that. We reduce that into 30 mandatory requirements. But yeah, my question is, can we be compliant with GDPR if we only have 30 mandatory requirements to fulfill? But okay, it's a starting point, and they agreed, up until now, that these 30 requirements could be actually used as starting point to be, to do the checkbox, are you as a DHT developer compliant with the GDPR? Next steps are, looking at the HDS, looking at MDR. Of course, we will not, or it's of no use that as a DHT developer, you have to prove evidence within 3 or 4 different assessments, frameworks, so no duplication. That will be very nicely. But then a second question. In my former life, I have a lot of former lives, but in my former life, I was an auditor. So I assessed a lot of hospitals, frameworks, and I brought in another dimension. It's the level of granularity. When you assess something, so for example, it's about the DPO. Do you have a policy about DPO? That is one of the mandatory aspects they all agreed on. Okay. No policy is also a policy. I don't have a policy, so the policy is we don't have a policy. And if you have a policy, what's in the policy? That's then level 2. How are we going to assess, to validate, to look for a proof of evidence? What is in your policy? You also executing the policy. And if not, what are the risks and how do you mitigate them? Last point, level 3 is, so you have a policy. Okay, all things are written in there. Okay, we have a proof of evidence that a policy is enrolled. But then the third one is, how can you prove that if things happen, that you just, I don't know what's happening. It's my artificial intelligence thing. So, we are there now. So we came from 250. We end in 30 requirements at this moment, but no levels. Just if they ask for a policy, you have to provide a policy, whatever you do with the policy or not. Now I want your action. I have some questions because within the project SSDHD, we have a lot of stakeholders, but one of the expert groups we are really missing. So we have HDA bodies, we have regulators, we have the physicians, we have, of course, the developers. But being participating a lot of these round tables, we miss a little bit, not a little bit, the DPOs, because you, as I learned today, all these things are in your basket. So if I can have, I will ask you some questions. So please take your phone. I will give you a QR code. So we will do a Mentimeter. And I just wanted to have 5 or 6 quick questions. Can I have, yes, please. I hope it's working because it's a tryout here. I already see it on this screen, so it should work. Yes, if you just scan the QR code, or you go to Mentimeter and then you use the code. Yeah, maybe I can have the first question. Thank you. So 250 GDPR-related criteria as a DPO role, manageable or not manageable, from 1 to 5. Just you can answer that question. The advantage of 250, you exactly know, of course, what to do, what kind of proof of evidence. The other hand, the balance, the other kind of the balance is, of course, yeah, you need to set up 250 proof of evidence things. Okay, thank you. Can I have the next question? So we see, of course, it's rather unmanageable. What about 30? This is completely in line with the HTA bodies. They will be happy to see this result. Okay, we have 48 answers out of 64. Thank you. Next question, please. 250 is one hand, 30 is maybe the other side. I know this is a rather abstract question because you don't know the criteria, but they are very much in line with the Euro privacy criteria, but more specific to digital health tools. Normally, I don't show the results because, yeah, bias, of course. Yeah, thank you. Next question, I think the last one. Or do you think 30 will adhere to the, or give an idea of the compliance with the GDPR? Thank you. Next question, please. So which GDPR domains should be top priority if you have to choose a domain? Because in the beginning of the presentation you saw more than 40 different domains, subdomains, but from a DPO point of view, what do you think are very important? And you can choose 3 of them. Pardon? Ah, okay. If you only can do one, okay, that is the most important one. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your participation, and if you have some questions, please find me during the lunch break. And I would like to hand it over now, I think, to Ioanni.
Thank you.
We need to come back to the slides to follow, I guess. Just let's see where the slides. The original one. Okay, Johannes, the floor is yours.
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. So I'm Gauthier-Maxence. I'm the Vice President of the European CRO Federation, means the contract research organizations in clinical research, service providers in clinical research. And UCROF has initiated the elaboration of a code of conduct under Articles 40 and 41. As it has been mentioned earlier by different speakers. Just to give you an idea, setting up a code like that has required 6-7 years now of continuous effort. It represents $500,000 investment, of which 1/5 has been in money, in cash, and the rest mainly in kind by the contributors. So it's a long process, and we've been approved in September last year, and we are now at the final stages of the accreditation of the monitoring body. So I will try very quickly to say a few words about the code. What is it? What is the difference maybe with a more global certification process? First of all, it is the first transnational, meaning it impacts the 27 EU member states, transnational GDPR code in the area of health, and particularly of clinical research. And it is important to understand that in this very specific domain, application of GDPR may not be that straightforward, because there are also other regulations which are interplaying with GDPR and opposing to some of the conditions of application of the general application of GDPR. So, of course, this needs a special approach. That is where code of conducts have an added value. So we interacted with many other stakeholders, of course, during the implementation, the elaboration of this code. I would say that having a compliance with 30 criteria for the code would have been just impossible. That's for sure. We try to really reach a compliance on which we can build strongly the required confidence and the data protection impact assessments that routinely we have to elaborate in our companies. In a code, you have to differentiate between the code owner. The code owner is UCROF, and the monitoring body. The monitoring body is called supervisory committee. It's an independent body, and this independent body can be either internal or external, can be subsidized to some external entity. In our case, we did the choice to have an internal body, and also this has been a complementary, an additional difficulty, because of course it's a first, and even the data protection authorities, they had no feedback on this, no experience in this area. So of course it concerns the adhering CROs, the adhering service providers, and the service providers now, you know that they have. They're not the so-called CROs, contract research organizations, strictly speaking. They include many IT vendors, many different kinds of providers nowadays. We can say that at UCROF we are representing 480 companies, more or less, in 32 countries, and 25% of the affiliated companies are nowadays IT providers. And of course, it concerns the investigational sites, because when they are using the services of CROs, they are using their platforms, and they have to trust on these providers, even if the providers has been selected by the sponsors. And of course, for the sponsors also, it matters to choose providers who are really compliant straight away, and that will limit the audits that need to be done. And we know that there is a very large heterogeneity between the assessments, vendor assessments, which are performed by the sponsors. So we try to unify a number of things with the code. So I already said who is covered, so we had a very limited scope. That's the difference also with a certification process. We select the clinical research. We have a scope that concerns the service providers acting in the frame of a contract with a sponsor, where the sponsor is strictly acting as controller and the service provider as data processor. And what is covered, because the words processor and controller are related to a specific process itself, you may have in one same company different roles as a controller or as a processor, depending on the process which you are looking at. So we have selected a number of classes of services which are covering more of the clinical research science. And then whose data are concerned, the patients and of course the healthcare professionals in the 27 EU member states. So we reached out with 217 requirements. A number of them are derived from the ISO 27001, a number of others derived from 27701. We did not reinvent the wheel where there was no requirement for that. We did not impose to have ISO certifications. That's also a way to facilitate access to adherence and just think that, of course, many of our companies are SMEs, smaller companies, and they have to comply with those 217 requirements, and this requires already some skills, and there are many companies helping in this. The other thing we would like to do, also in the future, you mentioned, I've seen from the presentation from Sébastien, NIS2. NIS2 is coming up nowadays, and we would like to have only one certification scheme that also would cover NIS2, for instance, so that those companies, they go through one single process that covers all what they have to do. So this is where lies one of the differences. You see Article 41, monitoring of approved code of conducts, and you see here that in some very specific domains like the health area, then you need to have bodies who are really knowledgeable about the specifics of this domain. That's really the case in the domain of health and particularly of clinical research, where, as I said, we have the interplay of so many regulations, be it for medical devices, for clinical trials, or etc. And now the European health data space with primary and secondary use, which is going to enter also progressively into force. So that is where the value of the code is really laying. The other point is that, of course, what we want is to increase the level of, let's say, of the companies which are affiliated to or adhering to the code with respect to, generally speaking, data protection. And you understand that data protection without addressing the cybersecurity threats, without addressing those things, is not applicable. And that is why we have these 217 requirements I mentioned earlier on. And this creates a basis to enable really built-in approaches to foster innovation while preserving safety and confidentiality. We have a basis coming from a quality management system to an information security and quality management system within our world of the service providers. We are ready to be confronted with new risks and to favor innovation with new devices, new approaches, where digitalization of the clinical research data flow becomes the standard. What the code is not, as I mentioned, we had to focus. Otherwise, it has taken 7 years to elaborate it, so we could not afford to have a longer time in elaborating it. So we have removed, in accordance, in agreement with the lead data protection authority, which has been the CNIL, representing our contact point towards the other 26 data protection authorities. And we have decided, as these issues were not mature enough, to remove international data transfers, or at least to use the code as a tool for international data transfer, or not when CROs are acting as data controllers. These are processes which are outside the scope of the code. Also not, and this has been a discussion at some stage with EFPIA, we also removed any items that would look at the responsibilities, sponsor or controller or data processor regarding sites, for instance, where there is still a debate. The status of the code, so the UDPB gave its favorable opinion in June 18. It's published on the website of UDPB, and the CNIL approved it, gave the final, published the final approval in the September 12, 24. And since then, we're working at the accreditation now of the monitoring body, and we are very close to it. At this stage, we hope early next year we will start with the accreditation. By the way, I just want to mention that assessing a code like that, the work of the lead authority is also a huge work. It has mobilized a team of 4 people within CNIL, and I suppose they had the support of other entities within CNIL. So it has also been a huge effort and investment from the side of the data protection authorities. Now the monitoring body has been set up. The COSUP members have been selected. I have the great honor to see here in this room Christophe Mars, who is vice president of the COSUP, Anastasia Negruk, who is a member of the COSUP, and so we are represented here, and yes. And the whole accreditation package is currently under review by CNIL. We are at the last stage. We have drafted 72 documents, and you can see here the names of all the members of the COSUP. And about the adherence process, maybe for this speech, as I think we are many speakers, and I don't know how we are about time, I will not cover that too much. Just have in mind that there are 2 levels, which are logically succeeding one to each other. The first level is a declarative adherence process. You can go online, and then you can apply online. And then once you have passed this step, you get the first mark, and then you go to the second mark with on-site audits of your company. That's an overview of the adherence process. I suppose the slides will be shared after the end, so you can refer to it. And anyway, you can go also on the website of UCROF, where you will find more details about the code. You can download the documents of the code. They are public documents, of course. There is a maintenance fee, of course, an adherence fee, so you can have an idea here of what are the adherence fees for our service providers, depending on the size of the company. And that's it for now about the code.
Thank you. I don't have slides, maybe a relief to some of you. I'll be very short. Just to start with, I should say that I am going to talk about the FPR Code of Conduct, the draft Code of Conduct, but I speak here in my own name, so whatever I say is on me, not on FPR. So what did FPR do? FPR prepared a GDPR Code of Conduct covering clinical trials and pharmacovigilance. Work started in 2018. It's been formally submitted for approval in July. So that took about 7 years. So it covers clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, and what we've done is basically put all the difficult things in one document and put it on the table of the regulators. Things like what's the legal basis of a clinical trial? Things like who's responsible in a clinical trial? Is a research site a processor or a controller? Things like when can you do secondary use with clinical trial data? things like, can you transfer data to a foreign authority for a product approval? And if so, on what basis? So basically all the difficult things that we have and face in clinical trials in one document and now submitted to the regulator. In terms of experience, I think we can say that it has been a fairly frustrating experience. You've seen the numbers. We have 3 codes of conduct in 7 years. 3 codes of conduct of processors. All 3 are processor codes of conduct. It's not one code of conduct for controllers. So I think there's not just in the pharma sector, but across the board, a level of frustration with that mechanism not working very well. The process is very slow. And I can say that because FPR's position on codes of conduct have been made public in the public consultation by the Commission on the GDPR. It's too slow, it's too burdensome. I think one of the main problems that we've seen or encountered with the code of conduct is the lack of interaction with regulators. We still find it inconceivable that certainly in complex areas of law, that you expect a code of conduct to be developed and not have a discussion with the sector as the board. It just doesn't work. We need to know what your problems are, and unless we know that, we can't produce a proper code of conduct. And you have to hear what our problems are. And I don't think the current mechanism of discussing and approving codes of conduct allows for that. It simply doesn't work. It's quite burdensome also. I mean, you faced it. Very important, long catalogs that you have to develop with detailed action items. An external monitoring body. In fact, we don't have a problem with that. That's fine. And in contrast to UCROF, I think FPR decided to have an external monitoring body. Only that monitoring body needs to be accredited, which takes a lot of time. And if I talk to the monitoring body, the number of documents and process is quite burdensome. And probably, I think, in my personal opinion, I think it's more burdensome than it should be. So that is an area where I think something can be done to increase the success of codes of conduct. Finally, and I said I would be short, there's also a question of why do you do it? Why do you do a code of conduct? What's the value of it? And of course, you have the value that you explained. But in the end, you do a code of conduct because you want to have a more streamlined regulatory regime for your sector in those areas, and more legal certainty. And frankly, better protection for trial participants and patients in case of pharmacovigilance, and a more consistent application of the law. An easier application, which also means often a better protection. And I feel that is undervalued with codes of conduct. And the best example of that is secondary use. So the FPR code of conduct addresses secondary use. You may remember my presentation from this morning where I said, well, if you do secondary use without consent, there's basically 2 models. There's one where you say, where there's no law, and where it's the data controller that decides on the safeguards and puts in place the safeguards. And those safeguards can be set out, for example, in a code of conduct, we would argue. Code of conduct that's approved by regulators, that's monitored by an external monitoring body. That's quite detailed in terms of the requirements and the conditions. That's one model. Or you can have a model where you say, well, no, we don't accept that. We need a law. You have to have a law for secondary use. Well, then why would you do a code of conduct? And also, we risk ending up in a situation where you have countries with a national law And I think, as an example, the Netherlands, sorry for my Dutch people in the room, Dutch law has a provision on secondary use for scientific research. I think it's 4 or 5 sentences. It's that long, literally. The German provision on secondary use of health data for scientific research is not that much better. So we're going to end, or risk ending up in a situation where 5 sentences in a law is considered better than 2 pages of detailed safeguards in a code of conduct approved by authorities and monitored by an external body. I think that makes no sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. That's pure legalistic interpretation of the GDPR that doesn't have the protection of patients at heart. It focuses on law and formalities rather than actual protection. And again, that's my personal opinion. But if we want codes of conduct to work, and we want people to invest in that, it has to have value. You have to have a reason to do it. If everything has to be in the law, then why would you do a code of conduct? That's it.
Thank you very much. I think it was a lot of very important topic to address. It's, as you mentioned, we need to ensure that whatever mechanism we set in place makes sense. And we don't forget the finality. Finality of the GDPR is to ensure effective protection of data subjects, finding ways to. So we don't have time for the panel. Just one thing, there is also another survey, if you have time, you're invited to scan it. That's for research. And we would be delighted. It will take no more than 3 minutes to fill it. It's just one slide. So please scan it and contribute to research to support you. That would be very welcome. And I just would like to thank all the panelists because they have been outstanding. I think we had different perspectives, very complementary perspectives. As you see, we have now new mechanisms. It took time. I know that GDPR was adopted almost 10 years ago. It entered into force almost 8 years ago. So it took time, but we hope really that it will have a massive impact. I was recently in Japan, where they have a certification for data protection. There are over 17,000 companies certified just in Japan. There is a need, it makes sense. But again, it's important that all the stakeholders, regulators, code of conduct developers, scheme owners can work together. Because at the end of the day, if I may say, that would be a subjective view, my personal view, I think we are all working for the same cause. I think all the DPOs in this room have the same concern at heart. So let's try to make it efficient, collaborative, and successful. So thank you very much again for your attention, and thanks, special thanks to applause to all the speakers. And a thanks also to the project that supported some of the work we presented here, European Research Project. And that's it. Thank you.
So just very quick, unfortunately your lunch break will be only 1 hour. So we resume at 2 p.m. And the workshop with Anastasia Negruk on 2 cassette studies will be upstairs. And the other one on harmonized DPIA would be here with Natahlie. So at 2 p.m. Enjoy your lunch.
Very good. Very good. There are one, so I figured yeah. That's our